few weeks ago here at Kermode Uncut, I asked you to tell me which scenes in movies had chilled you the most. This was off the back of the release of Woman in Black, a kind of ghostly chiller starring Daniel Radcliffe. Hundreds of responses from you. Some titles kept coming up time and time again. Blair Witch Project, that still seems to work with audiences, still seems to give you the creeps. Many people mentioned Philip Kaufman's remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, specifically the Sutherland scream, although I'd like to add to that Dogface. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. Loads and loads of you mentioned the scene from Ringu, which I spoilt when introducing that movie on Channel 4 years ago. I'm not going to do that again, nor am I going to give away the scene which you're all referring to from Kim Ji-woon's Tale of Two Sisters, which is genuinely creepy, less so if you don't know about it. The end of Don't Look Now, the end of The Wicker Man, I'm sure everyone knows what they are now, because actually they're on the front cover of the DVDs, but they came up time and time again. However, here are just some of your suggestions for most chilling scenes. This from Blue Juicer, this was a title which came up a few times, Whistle and I'll Come to You. I know it's a TV play, but the atmosphere of slow, creeping dread it creates, plus Michael Hordern's fine performance, make this genuinely very creepy indeed. That is a wonderful adaptation by Jonathan Miller of the M.R. James story. I remember seeing it on TV and absolutely loving it, particularly the sequence in which Michael Hordern is having a row with somebody who says, you know, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than there are in your philosophy, to which Michael Hordern replies, no, there are more things in philosophy than there are in heaven and earth. And he looks down at his plate and says, lovely breakfast. I've always loved the film for that little moment. Moving on, this from Myerla, I hope. The scene from The Orphanage in which Bella Rader's character is playing that 1, 2, 3 knock on the wall game. Every time she turns to look round, the kids move ever so closer. Obviously, the kids mean no harm, but it's the most spine-tingling moment I've ever experienced. I love that film. Bella Rader, of course, won a Kermode Award for Best Actress for that year. This from Hannibal Pierce, it has to be The Innocents, another title which came up time and time again, specifically the scene where Deborah Kerr has lost the little girl that she's supposed to be looking after. She goes running into the grounds of the mansion where they live and finds her down by the pond, but then she looks up and just watching them from the other side of the pond amongst the reeds is the ghostly figure of a woman. It's so matter of fact, which is why it's so effective, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it now, even though I'm in an office full of co-workers. Now, many of you wrote in suggesting The Shining, and many of you also said you don't like The Shining. I do. I like The Shining enough. I don't think it's perfect, but there are key scenes in The Shining that I think are great. Both of them get a mention. This from Jeff Dents. I think one of the most chilling scenes in cinema is the conversation between Delbert Grady and Jack Torrance in the bathroom in The Shining. Incredibly static scene. Grady's head barely moves. His eyes are piercing slits. He transforms from innocent waiter to understated psychopath with his posh voice and rolling R's. My children didn't care for the Overlook Hotel at first. I corrected them, sir. And when my wife tried to prevent me from doing my duty, I corrected her. Brilliant scene, fantastic performance, not by me, obviously. And this from Bradavon, when Shelley Duvall opens the manuscript for the book her husband is writing in The Shining and realises he's gone, well, you know, in case you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give this away. Stephen King, who wrote The Shining in his book Dance Macabre, refers to that scene in the film. And he describes it by simply saying, the moment when she realises what her husband's been doing all this time. Now, here are a few somewhat left field choices, I think is the phrase. This from Lol Fox. Perhaps it's a bit weird, but a scene that left me chilled to the core and a shivering wreck is the introduction to Octopussy. A clown running through a forest pursued by his assassins. Absolutely terrifying, although I must admit, I was about 7 years old when I saw it, and I think I'm over it now. Fear of clowns, which is like coulrophobia or something like that, is indeed a very common fear, although I haven't heard anyone referring to Octopussy in their top 10 chills before, so thanks for that. This from Silence of the Lamb Chop. As one of your younger watchers, the most chilling thing I ever saw was when I was 7, the scene in Return of the King, when Smeagol leads Frodo into the lair of the spiders, still sends chills down my spine. And this from J. James D. Speaking as the much younger person I was at the time, I would like to submit, guess what? Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets as the film in which I was undoubtedly chilled the most. Without doubt, Christian Coulson rearranging Tom Marvolo Riddle to I am Lord Voldemort unto a defenceless standalone Harry trapped in a chamber, blah, 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 sent immeasurable chills down my spine, at least. Well, again, it just says something for each generation, different things scare them. There we go, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, John Carpenter turned up loads and loads of times in your responses. The thing that did surprise me was how often Prince of Darkness turned up. This, for example, from Constantine 88. The one scene that still chills me is the repeated hallucination scene in John Carpenter's massively underrated Prince of Darkness, of a black figure hovering in a church doorway. It isn't a shock and it isn't a gross out, but the handheld camera nature of the scene makes it so effective, a million times more so than the entirety of Blair Witch or Cloverfield. This from Aj Witter, I think AJ Witter. My vote has to go to Isabella Gianni's infamous scene, you know the one, from Złowski's unnerving masterpiece Possession, which we've talked about a lot on the blog here. The violence and the guttural nature of the scene, coupled with its extended length, makes my spine clench up every time. I love that film. If you haven't seen Possession, believe me, it is genuinely bonkers. Now this from Hannah Pancake, which a lot of you picked up on. I found the scene in Pierpoint where Albert, played by Tim Spall, is faced with performing the hanging of his close friend extremely chilling. Having already been aware of the storyline, it was chilling to see his friend revealed as the next criminal facing his punishment. Tim Spall's sensational performance causes this scene to leave me stiff in my seat from the chills it sends through my body. A wonderful film depicting a tragic story. It is a really, really great piece of work. So many of you picked up on this. Once, Danny Dyer tried to insult me by saying, "He looks like Tim Spall." I took it as a compliment. Now here's something which came up time and time again. Pretty much every single film by David Lynch got a mention from somebody as featuring one of their most chilling moments. I mean, the entire Lynch catalogue. Here are just some examples. This from Ricious. The most obvious is the lady in the radiator from Eraserhead. In a sense, it's just so nightmarish and creepy, almost in an unexplainable way. This from Calflump. The infamous behind the diner scene in David Lynch's brilliant Mulholland Drive. The way it escalates through the monologue simply by talking about a dream is good enough, but the follow-through is almost unbearable. This from Sam Smith-Jones. One of the most chilling moments for me is the party scene from David Lynch's fantastic Lost Highway, where Bill Pullman's character Fred meets the mystery man, played by Robert Blake. He tells Fred that he is at his house right now. Fred phones his house, and the voice of the mystery man answers at the house while he's standing right in front of Fred. And I remember that really creeped me out when I first saw it. This from Patrick Lyle towards the end of Inland Empire, where Laura Dern spends 5 minutes wandering through dark corridors before encountering her nemesis. That came up loads of times. Many of you don't like the film, but love that scene. From Sean T, Frank Booth. Anytime he appeared on screen in Blue Velvet. And from Ben Massey, can't believe no one's mentioned Killer Bob. Just imagine how scared Laura must have been. I'd like to add to this Fire Walk With Me, which I think was not only one of the best films in David Lynch's canon, but the best horror film of that year. A really, really underrated masterpiece that just creeped the hell out of me. I honestly could carry on reading these all day, but just a few more, because I know you've got other things to do. This from Jordan Bruce. Just this past week, Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene had me completely clamming up and gave me a growing feeling of unease as the film progressed. It wasn't until about an hour after the film finished that the full weight of what I'd seen had hit me and left me feeling quite ill. As I've said, the best way to see that film is knowing as little about it as possible, but I do think of it as a horror movie. I do agree with that comment. This from Kaiser Soze's Ghost, welcome back. Talks about Eyes Without a Face, the cold, emotionless mask. Even now, I get the shivers just thinking about it. Copied many times, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Silence of the Lambs. Camille, for me, holds the title for the most disturbing mask wearer. A lot of stuff about masks. This from Bobox. Any scene with the mask in Oni Barber I found pretty chilling. I think I read somewhere that it inspired the subliminal demon face in The Exorcist, so Freaky must have thought so too. That is apparently true. I know. He told me. Couple of final ones from Dan Sumption. Funny Games. The bit in the living room. All of it. If you've seen Funny Games, you know that almost all of it takes place in the living room. This from Jason X. The end of Angel Heart, where Mickey Rourke realises who he is, what he's done, and where he's going. If you're a fan of that film, which I am, except for the glowing eyes, you should read the novel, the William Hjortsberg novel, Falling Angel. One of the really clever things that the Alan Parker film adaptation does is that in the novel, he realises that he knows the song that he keeps singing, that he keeps whistling. Of course, in the film, they're actually able to play the song. It's a brilliant, brilliant touch. And this, finally, from G.R. Newby, in response to what's the most chilling thing you've ever seen? Pierce Brosnan singing in Mamma Mia. I had to change my underwear.